Welcome to the Tantric Traveler. I'm your host, John Prophet. In this episode, I traveled to Austin, Texas to interview the founder of the Fusebox Arts Festival, Ron Barry. Please enjoy our new segment, Art Space. Art Space.
Largely, there were kind of three factors that I was interested in. The first of which was just creating a more dynamic, more meaningful conversation that spanned geography. I felt like Austin was a bit geographically isolated, less so with music and film. I think those things travel easier, but especially with regards to the live arts, theater, dance, performance, and visual art to a certain extent as well. Things that you really have to be in the space with it to experience it. It's really hard to engage in this larger conversation if you're not getting to experience these things in person. So that felt really important to me. And again, both as an artist, I was making theater and installation work, but also just as someone that enjoys these things. And it felt like there was all this work going, or a lot of energy going into the creation of new work in Austin, which was really exciting, but a lot of it just felt like it was happening in a vacuum. And sometimes amazing things happen in a vacuum, but I feel like ideally, when you're making new work in any art form, that you have some sort of awareness and some kind of conversation with what's happening elsewhere, whether you agree with it or not, or like it or not. But so that was kind of the first, I think, reason or impetus behind it. And then the other was to really create a more meaningful conversation between these different art forms. I'd always been very interested in this conversation and this exchange, both as an artist and as a citizen of the world. I felt like I navigated these different worlds all the time as a person, love to go to the museum, love to go see films, love dance and theater and writing. And I also just felt like a lot of the most interesting work was kind of happening in between the lines, in between these different art forms. And it, in some ways it felt even redundant to use the word like multimedia or cross-disciplinary, just because more and more so much of the really interesting work is happening in that world. It felt in some ways silly to even classify it as such, because there's so much is happening in that arena. But at the same time, we were running the Blue Theater, which was a funky warehouse space that we converted in East Austin into a theater and an art gallery, and we also had film screenings, and it felt like those three worlds were still really distinct, even though it was all in the same building. The people that were coming to see the art shows were not coming to see the theatrical performances or the dance or the film, and vice versa. And it felt kind of silly that there wasn't a little more conversation. I think there's a lot to learn from each other. So that was this other big idea behind the festival, was if only for a couple of weeks, let's create a platform for different artists, different audience members to engage and encounter some things that maybe they're less familiar with. But also, and I guess the third thing was to really kind of raise the bar and really, I think Fusebox is different than a fringe festival in that it's curated. So really wanted to bring in artists that people hadn't seen before, that probably wouldn't come here otherwise, or that were just doing something really exceptional or looking at something in a really interesting way. My interest in sort of combining and colliding forms to create new forms or new experiences is my interest in that is not so much that I'm interested in just creating weird shit. Although I sometimes love weird shit, but it's really about getting at something more relevant that speaks to the human experience today, the contemporary experience, what it means to be alive in the world today. Because I think sometimes the older forms, there reaches a point where there's more and more artifice surrounding a particular form or strategy, and at that point I think you have to start examining other ways of getting at the truth of of our time. I don't view art as something separate from life. I feel like it is very much a part of life, part of the fabric of life. And in some ways, sitting here with you, having coffee with my mother, walking the dog, and going to see a piece of theater or making a piece of theater, it's all the same thing. It's all about just sort of engaging with the world.